What happens when two powerful men meet in secret? One fighting for Africa's future, the other a former U.S. president burdened with unspoken regrets. This is the story of a meeting that could alter the course of history. It was a calm afternoon in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, when President Ibrahim Traoré received an unexpected message. His advisors handed him a sealed letter delivered by a diplomatic envoy, a formal request for a confidential meeting. The letter was short, but unmistakable. Former U.S. President Barack Obama wished to speak with him privately, away from the public eye. Ibrahim had heard rumors of Obama's admiration for his leadership, but this invitation came without warning. Why Obama? Why now? And what could he possibly want to discuss in secrecy? These questions echoed in Ibrahim's mind as he read the message. His curiosity stirred, though his face remained unreadable. The world had been watching Burkina Faso and President Traoré closely ever since he rose to power. His leadership had been bold, some said defiant, as he stood for national sovereignty and pushed back against Western dominance. Many in the West accused him of being too radical, too aligned with nations like North Korea, and too willing to shake the global order. Yet here he was, now facing the chance to meet a man once considered the leader of the free world. After careful thought, Ibrahim chose to accept. The meeting was set for a discreet government compound, far from media and public attention. Only a few trusted aides were informed, and they too were puzzled by the secrecy. That evening, Ibrahim arrived with a small security detail, ensuring total discretion. Inside the secluded room, the tension was palpable, as though something larger than a conversation was about to unfold. Ibrahim stepped in and was greeted by Barack Obama, whose familiar face wore a warm smile. Yet behind his eyes was a quiet intensity, a mix of respect and unresolved emotion. Ibrahim, composed but alert, braced himself. What was this really about? What might it mean for Burkina Faso's future? "Thank you for meeting with me, President Traoré," Obama said, his tone calm but deliberate. "I know this is unusual, but I've followed your work and the courage you've shown. I wanted to speak freely, away from the spotlight. There are things we must discuss." Ibrahim nodded silently, allowing Obama to continue. He had not expected such a meeting, especially from someone as influential as Obama. The world had shifted since Obama's presidency, and the stakes now felt higher than ever. This wasn't just about Burkina Faso, it was about Africa. "I'm listening," Ibrahim replied, his voice steady, his thoughts hidden. Obama inhaled deeply, his expression serious. "There are things I need to tell you, Ibrahim. Things I can only say face to face." He eased into his chair, and for a moment, silence filled the space between them, heavy with history. Then Obama spoke again, his voice low but sincere. "I've watched your leadership, Ibrahim," he began, "and I admire your bravery. Under your command, Burkina Faso has become a symbol of resistance, of standing tall in the face of pressure. You're not just leading your nation, you're igniting a fire for the entire continent." Ibrahim listened, still quiet. He was used to Western criticism, accused of being rebellious, hardline. But these words from Obama felt different. They carried weight. They came from understanding. Obama paused before continuing. "I know you've faced tremendous obstacles, from within and beyond your borders. But there's something else I came to share, something I've carried with me since leaving office, and it's time someone like you heard it." Ibrahim's curiosity sharpened. He'd heard many things about Obama, but this sounded like a confession. "President Traoré, I have regrets," Obama said, his gaze dropping. "When I was in power, I didn't do enough for Africa. I didn't support leaders like you. We often praised Africa's potential, but when it came to real change, to helping nations take control of their destinies, I remained silent. I didn't take the risks that mattered most." Ibrahim sat quietly, absorbing the moment. Rarely had a Western leader spoken with such candor. It was vulnerability, unexpected, but real. and despite their political distance, Ibrahim couldn't help but respect the honesty. "I should have done more," Obama continued, his voice firming. "I should have backed African strength when the world tried to undermine it. Instead, I let the old system prevail. I'm sorry for that." Ibrahim took a deep breath. He had once viewed Obama as a symbol of hope, but now, hearing this, he saw something deeper. This apology wasn't just personal. It touched on decades of Western control and interference. "I appreciate your words, Mr. Obama," Ibrahim said thoughtfully. "But our fight for sovereignty isn't just about apologies. It's about action. For too long, Africa has been exploited, manipulated, controlled. That must end." Obama nodded, the truth of Ibrahim's words undeniable. "You're right, and that's why I'm here. Africa can no longer wait for permission to rise. You've already proven that. You're standing firm, and I respect that." Silence returned for a moment. Ibrahim reflected not just on Obama's admission, but what it represented. He had long believed that Africa's future belonged to Africans. Now Obama had confirmed the West must acknowledge its wrongs and step back. "I don't care about the past," Ibrahim finally said. "What matters is the future. Africa will rise. We won't wait for approval. We'll shape our destiny with our own hands and our own values, not those imposed on us." Obama smiled faintly, his eyes filled with both sorrow and admiration. "I agree. Africa's future lies in its own strength. Leaders like you are paving a new road, one that doesn't depend on the West's favor, but on unity, pride, and purpose." The conversation continued. They spoke about Africa's potential, the need for Pan-African unity, the challenges ahead. Obama shared his view of global politics, how Africa had long been misunderstood. Ibrahim listened carefully, contributing his thoughts and vision. But in the back of his mind, one truth remained. The world's view of Africa must change, but so must Africa's view of itself. Only when African nations stopped seeing themselves through Western eyes would true power emerge. "I hope," Ibrahim said toward the end of their meeting, "that the lessons of the past help shape a better future. But Africa must lead. We cannot rely on others to solve our problems. We will do that ourselves." Obama stood, offering his hand, a gesture of solidarity and respect. "I believe you will, and I will support you, however I can." As their hands met, the conversation's gravity hung in the air. Ibrahim knew the journey ahead would not be easy, but he also knew something had changed. Africa was waking up. The silence once forced upon the continent was now being broken by voices that could no longer be ignored, and Ibrahim Traoré, with unwavering vision and strength, would be one of the leaders guiding that awakening. In the days that followed the secret meeting, Ibrahim couldn't shake the memory of Obama's words. The conversation echoed in his mind, the apology, the recognition, the shared understanding. Yet one feeling lingered most. Africa's moment had arrived. One morning, Ibrahim sat in his office watching the sun rise over Ouagadougou. The city bustled below, but there was a new energy in the air. Change was coming, not just to Burkina Faso, but across Africa. His reflection was interrupted by a knock. General Kabore, his loyal military ally, entered with a folder of updates. "President Traoré," he said gravely, placing the papers on the desk. "We've heard from neighboring states. Concerns are growing about your push for full independence, especially after your meeting with Obama." Ibrahim didn't flinch. He had expected this. Fear of change was natural. Resistance was predictable. But this was bigger than fear. "Let them question us," Ibrahim said, his tone firm. "This is the right path. If they can't see that, they're not ready to lead. We must stop letting the West dictate our fate. I will not be the president who watches Africa remain under foreign control." Kabore nodded, but his eyes held concern. "Sir, the sanctions are tightening. Trade is collapsing. The people are feeling it. There's growing unrest." Ibrahim leaned forward, his expression firm and unwavering. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," he said quietly. "But no one ever said freedom comes without sacrifice. We are building something that will endure. Our people will understand. They will see we are fighting for something far greater than short-term comfort. This is for our children, for their future, for Africa's rightful place in the world." Despite General Kabore's concerns, Ibrahim's resolve only deepened. He had anticipated that challenging Western dominance would come with consequences, but the decision was made. There was no turning back. Burkina Faso could no longer afford to be a pawn of foreign interests. The time had come for African leaders to shape their own destinies. That evening, Ibrahim addressed the nation in a televised speech. His voice was calm, steady, yet filled with conviction as he spoke not just to Burkina Faso, but to the entire continent. "The time has come for Africa to rise as one," he declared. "We will no longer bend to the will of foreign powers. We refuse to be controlled by those who have long exploited our lands, our people, and our resources. Our future belongs to us, and no one else will define what it should look like." He paused, staring directly into the camera. "I know the path ahead is difficult. I know many of you are struggling under the pressure. But this fight is not just about one country. It is about the future of Africa. We must unite and remain firm. Together, we will build a future where our children can live freely, grow strong, and never again be shackled by foreign dominance." As the broadcast ended, silence filled the room. Ibrahim sat back, aware that his words would be met with both admiration and criticism. But they had to be said. Burkina Faso would no longer bow. It was a bold declaration, one that echoed not only within his borders, but across the African continent. In the days that followed, international responses surged. Western leaders condemned his speech, branding it a blow to diplomacy. They warned that Burkina Faso was isolating itself. But in the streets of Ouagadougou, the atmosphere was entirely different. People gathered, discussing Ibrahim's message with renewed hope and fierce determination. They knew the road ahead would be hard, but they were ready to fight for their nation's dignity. Crowds chanted slogans of unity and independence. Ibrahim's leadership had sparked something powerful. The people were no longer passive. They were now active in the battle for their nation's freedom. And the more the West pushed back, the stronger their resolve became. In the weeks that followed, Ibrahim focused on strengthening ties with African nations that shared his vision. Leaders from countries like South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria voiced their support, recognizing that this was about more than Burkina Faso. It was about reclaiming the continent's future. Yet Ibrahim knew international support was not enough. Burkina Faso had to stand strong on its own. He redirected national resources into local industries, education, healthcare, and agriculture. He made it clear, the era of dependency on foreign aid was over. The people would rely on their own strength, creativity, and unity. As months passed, Western pressure intensified. Sanctions strained the economy, trade slowed. But Ibrahim remained resolute. The challenges were real, but so was the dream of a self-determined Africa. He had witnessed the power of a continent united, and even as uncertainty loomed, he held fast to one belief. Africa's future would be written by Africans, on African terms. And with that vision guiding him, Ibrahim Traoré continued to lead, not just as the president of Burkina Faso, but as a symbol of a continent reclaiming its voice, its dignity, and its destiny. Ibrahim Traoré was strengthening ties with other African nations, particularly those that had voiced their solidarity with Burkina Faso's stance. Leaders from countries like South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria began supporting his vision, realizing that his struggle wasn't just for one nation, it was for the entire African continent. Still, Ibrahim knew he couldn't rely solely on outside support. He had to build a self-sufficient Burkina Faso, one that could stand on its own. So, he redirected more resources toward local industries while heavily investing in education, healthcare, and agriculture. To his fellow citizens, he reminded them that their future must not depend on foreign aid, but on their own strength, creativity, and unity. As the months passed, Western pressure intensified, but Ibrahim's leadership remained steadfast. The challenges were immense, but he had seen what Africa could achieve when united. And though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear to him: Africa's destiny must now be written by Africans themselves. Guided by this vision, he pressed forward in his mission, convinced that the fate of an entire continent was at stake. The following months were marked by both hope and new hardships. Burkina Faso's determination to resist Western influence remained firm, but the price of that independence grew increasingly steep. The West, led by the United States and France, tightened its sanctions. The effects were soon felt. Prices of basic goods skyrocketed, unemployment soared, and economic strain weighed heavily on the population. In Ouagadougou, once bustling markets grew quiet. On the streets, whispers of worry became more frequent. The youth, who had once passionately backed Ibrahim's message, now began to wonder how long they could endure these sacrifices. For Ibrahim, it was a defining moment. Would his people continue to stand with him, or would they buckle under the pressure? One evening, alone in his office, he looked over reports filled with signs of the nation's growing frustration. The political opposition, quiet in recent months, began speaking out again. Critics accused him of dragging Burkina Faso into a deep economic crisis. Even some of his closest allies in government were starting to question the path ahead. The question loomed. In defying the West, was he pushing the country to the brink? Ibrahim remained silent, weighing each decision carefully, aware that any choice could have irreversible consequences. But he also knew that no real independence came without a fight. He recalled the words of his ancestors, their long struggle to liberate African soil from colonial chains. They hadn't given up. Neither would he. The next morning, he called in his closest advisors. Around the table, tension was thick. General Traoré, his loyal military chief, spoke first. "President Traoré, the pressure is becoming unbearable. The people are starting to lose faith. We can't afford to lose their support. We need to show them this fight has meaning." Ibrahim looked around the room. These men and women had stood by him through every battle. He could feel their loyalty, but also their concern. "We will not back down," he said calmly but firmly. "We must keep fighting, but we must also show our people that this struggle is building a better future. The road is long, but it's worth walking." He leaned forward. "We will strengthen our industries, invest in agriculture, in education. We will lay the foundations for a Burkina Faso that needs no one to survive. The world will see that Africa can rise without anyone's charity. Everything we need is already here." The general nodded, though his eyes betrayed unease. "But the West, Mr. President, they won't let us do this." "I'm not afraid of their threats," Ibrahim replied. "Burkina Faso is no longer their pawn. We will face the consequences, but with dignity, and we will build a future that is ours, and ours alone." In the days that followed, Ibrahim and his team worked tirelessly on new strategies to ensure the country's self-reliance. They focused on sustainable development, training farmers to increase yields, and supporting local industries. The goal was clear: to make Burkina Faso's economy immune to outside manipulation. Ibrahim addressed the nation again. "The path will be hard," he declared, "but we are not afraid. We are building a future that is free and strong. We are reclaiming what is ours." The reaction was mixed. Resistance remained, both inside and outside the country. But for the first time, Ibrahim felt his people were united, despite the hardship. The fight had grown beyond rejecting Western interference. It was now about rebuilding Africa from the ground up, about shaping a future in which it stood proud and sovereign. Weeks passed. The challenges did not disappear, but signs of hope began to emerge. Agricultural output rose. Small businesses reopened. The economy remained fragile, but Ibrahim could see the seeds of renewal beginning to take root. Then came a surprise. The African Union, after months of silence, began voicing its support. Heads of state joined his call. Ibrahim was invited to multiple diplomatic summits, where he spoke of a united Africa, free from colonial shadows and foreign domination. Despite continued criticism from the West, change was underway. African support was growing steadily, and it became clear that Ibrahim Traoré was no longer just the president of Burkina Faso. He had become a symbol of African resistance, of the continent's yearning for freedom, unity, and dignity. One evening, seated alone in his office, Ibrahim reflected on how far they had come. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, he truly believed Africa had risen. And with that belief, with that strength, Burkina Faso and the entire continent would forge a future defined by its own will. The journey will not be easy, Ibrahim declared in his speech, but we are not afraid. We are building a future that is free, that is strong. We are taking back what is ours, and in the end, we will stand tall. The response across the nation was mixed. There were still pockets of resistance, both from within the country and beyond its borders. But for the first time, Ibrahim felt that he had truly united his people, united them in a way that went beyond their immediate struggles. This was no longer just a battle against Western powers. It had become a mission to rebuild Africa from the ground up, to create a future where Africans could make decisions for themselves, free from outside interference. Weeks turned into months. The challenges didn't vanish overnight, but signs of progress began to emerge. Burkina Faso started to make tangible advances in food production, with local farmers producing more than ever before. Small businesses slowly regained their footing as communities turned to their own resources and ingenuity. The economy was still fragile, but change was in motion. Ibrahim could see the seeds of a new era being planted. Then came an unexpected development. The African Union, after months of silence, began to shift. Several African leaders started voicing their support for Ibrahim's stand on African sovereignty. One by one, other nations began to echo Burkina Faso's call for independence and self-determination. Ibrahim was invited to attend high-level diplomatic summits, where he passionately spoke of a united Africa, an Africa no longer shackled by colonial history or foreign domination. He envisioned a continent that could rise together, proud and sovereign. Through it all, criticism from the West continued. But something had changed. This time, it no longer stood unchallenged. The support from African nations was growing stronger, and it became increasingly clear Ibrahim Traoré was no longer just the president of Burkina Faso. He had become a symbol of African defiance, of the continent's deep yearning for freedom, unity, and dignity. One evening, as Ibrahim sat quietly in his office, the weight of the journey behind him and the road still ahead pressed on his mind. The fight was far from over. The path forward remained uncertain, but in his heart he knew one thing: Africa was finally beginning to rise. And with that belief, with that strength, Burkina Faso and all of Africa would march toward a future they could call their own, a future free from the chains of foreign control.